Okay, welcome super secret agent trainees to WhizGirls Academy. Today we have a special mission for you, and we have the amazing Jen Diffenderfer from Google. She is the head of customer engineering. Welcome, Jen.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Tell us about your childhood.
All right. Well, we're jumping right in. So it's great to be here. Thanks again for the time today. So my childhood actually started in Pennsylvania on the East Coast of the US. But shortly thereafter, I wound up moving with my family to Oahu in Hawaii, which meant a very big change in geography, which also meant a very big change in the things that I did with my friends and kind of the sports that you play and all sorts of different things. So I kind of had to figure out my place and all of that stuff. And it really pushed me to experiment with a lot of different things that I didn't know how to do. So what I would do on, the summers and things like that, I volunteer lifeguarded to teach kids how to swim and surf and sail, canoe, kayak, you call it, you name it. We did all the things at the beach. We had chickens. I was the oldest of 3 kids. I have a younger brother and a younger sister. We had chickens, we had geese, we had a peacock, believe it or not, who his name was Big Bird. And it was a crazy place to live. We lived in a valley, and we had a lot of mud. So my brother, my sister, and I, you could always tell when we got to school because we kind of had a little pathway of mud footsteps, and they're like, oh, there they are, But it was a ton of fun to live and grow up there. We were always at the beach, taught you a lot of important life lessons from an early stage. So, but now I live in Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., and have 2 amazing boys. They're 7 and 10, and with my husband, who's an entrepreneur. And we have 1 dog. We don't have any chickens or peacocks or anything like that today.
Oh, what kind of dog do you have?
We have a poodle shih tzu. He's a little guy, about 15 pounds of fury, and his name is Boost.
Very cute. That's awesome. All right. Thank you for sharing your childhood. Tell us about your passions and hobbies as a child and now, and if you had a dream job back then.
Oh, goodness. I have so many good, fun stories about this one. So I mentioned I was a super outdoorsy kiddo. We were always doing something that was mildly dangerous. We lived right next to the beach, so there was always the danger and the power of the ocean looming right outside of the yard. But I did volleyball, paddling. I have a couple of pictures, actually. Let me fire something up for us here. This will help while I'm chatting. And so I did a bunch of different things growing up on the North Shore. And here's just to give you a reference of where the map is and all of that stuff. Very, very top north part of Oahu. Beautiful place. If you haven't been, I highly recommend going. It's awesome. There's my muddy feet. Not really my muddy feet, but muddy feet were a big part of growing up. So I did karate, sailed, did a lot of hiking, some volleyball, and the high school sport that I played was outrigger canoeing. So up there on the top left. It was a ton of fun. A lot of teamwork went into it. A lot of strategy went into it. But I wasn't very tall, so I wasn't a great volleyball player. I'm only 5'3". I was 5'3" back then. I still haven't grown. I'm still waiting. But my dream job at the time, I was always fascinated by trains. And so my dream job at the time was to be a train conductor, believe it or not, because you kind of see the world from a whole different perspective that you really only see on a train track. And I just always thought that was really cool, and the power of it and all of that stuff. I did not become a train conductor. I became a technologist, and very, very different from trains. I still love trains. But I would say between that and kind of all of the outdoorsy things, I still have a lot of passion around the outdoors and being up in the sky and being a pilot and all sorts of different things, and teaching the kids along the way, how fun it can be to do things that are kind of uncommon.
All right, you mentioned something that's huge, like you became a pilot. So tell us about that journey and how that started.
Sure, sure. So it really was started when I was a young girl. My dad was just a pilot, kind of as a recreational activity. He was also a skydiver and still is. Actually, he still skydives to this day. Both my parents skydived. And I can remember being a little girl, getting into the back of his Cessna because he had to be in a car seat, very safe. And it was always something really cool to me, even though as soon as I would get in, I think we would take off and I would go to sleep. But it kind of ignited that curiosity of like flight and freedom of flight and all of those things. So it was always something that I wanted to do. But flying there's a lot of time. It's kind of like going back to school. There's a lot of time. There's science. There's weather. There's physics. There's the physical aspect to it. There's a lot of studying that you have to do. So finding the time to do all of those things was really hard when you're kind of juggling work and life and, being a mom and trying to keep your head on straight with all of these different things going on. So I started about 15 years ago and I've been flying since then. So I thoroughly enjoy it. It's a practice for me. It's not something that anyone is perfect at. It's not like a finish line that you're like, oh, okay, done. It's over. It's more of a practice that you can continue refining. Every single flight is different, no matter if you're flying the exact same place that you've flown last week. Every single flight is different because of weather, because of other planes, because of when you're leaving in the day, the temperatures, all of those different things factor into your flight. And it's a ton of fun. And it's hard, it's challenging, but it's truly something that I've discovered and worked on as a practice. And I can share it with my family, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned a little bit about science and like physics and other things related to flying. Can you tell us about that? And then also, when did you hear about the word STEM?
Yes. So to prepare and become a pilot, there are two main chunks that you have to be tested on. One is a written test, and it tests you on everything from why do clouds form, to how does snow happen, to why are thunderstorms what they are, and to different weather patterns. It's kind of like when you're looking at the news and they have all of those squiggly lines and all of that stuff. You really have to understand what that all means, because it can either create an amazing, beautiful flight or something that could get you into a little bit of a dangerous situation. So you really need to understand all of the different weather patterns. And it's funny because, now I'll look outside and it looks like a beautiful day to most people. And I'm like, oh, but look at that cloud and look at that cloud. And that means this is coming. And they're like, everyone loves it. But it really has created this whole other sense of awareness of the thing that we just kind of take for granted is the sky and the clouds and the rain and the snow and all of that stuff. Like, no, there's processes, there's heat exchange, there's all sorts of different things that happen. So that is it's a ton of fun. And again, I'm always learning about it. And the first time that I heard about STEM, so STEM for me was kind of a term that was starting to become used. When I was growing up, there wasn't, perhaps it was just kind of where I was and just the very close intersection between the world around us, the ocean and the weather and all of that stuff in Hawaii. And where we were. We were kind of isolated, you're out there in the middle of the Pacific. So there were a lot of my friends who went into all sorts of different science types of study, whether it's marine biology, whether it's, psychology and the social sciences, whether it's teachers. There was a lot of that. At the time when I was in, middle school and high school, I didn't really consider that to be my path. I'm like, I'll get there at some point. I'll make that decision when I need to, which kind of led me down the whole, kind of explore a bunch of different areas of interest before I really settled on what I wanted to do for my career and kind of who I wanted to build myself around. And so STEM was always something that was like, well, yeah, of course I'm curious about it, but what, how do I actually put it into practice? So I always loved the sciences. And I also recognized early on that I'm someone who learns really well with my hands. doing something as opposed to reading about it, listening to something. I love working on things. And kind of tying it back to flying, I love doing things with the plane. Maintenance, minor things that I can do comfortably, that I've been trained to do. But I'm always trying to learn, about different systems and different parts of the plane, and, do my own oil changes and understand how the, brake systems work and the engine systems and all of that stuff. So it's a ton of fun, and it kind of surprises people around me, because they're like, wait, you're doing this? And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, doesn't everyone? And they're like, well, that's not terribly common, but that's okay. Do you need any help? I'm like, no, I got it. So it's a ton of fun.
Yeah, why not? If you're into it and it's like, you like learning, and it's all kind of STEM related, technically, it's all good. And it's funny because you mentioned the cloud, and I was thinking you went from like real clouds to the Google Cloud. So we have to figure out where, that happened, what that journey is, and we'd love to hear about that. Yeah. So before we move to that, did you have any mentors along the way in the STEM journey?
So I would consider a few mentors along the way to be, some of them are coworkers, some of them were managers. This is going to get into kind of how I found the journey to the cloud. I had a manager when I was a help desk. I worked at our help desk in college, and really long story short, I worked there. It was at 9 p.m. to midnight, because we had coverage from like 8 a.m. in the morning to like midnight at night, because some students are studying pretty much all hours of the day. So you need your help desk to be available for you. So I had a mentor at the time. Her name was Barb, and she was the IT help desk manager. And she and I were the only women in the whole org. And we worked with a number of amazing guys, but we were the only two. And so there was kind of this instant connection, and she recognized that I really enjoyed, helping people to fix problems. And I really enjoyed it as well, because I realized early on that when you help fix someone's problem, there's near instant trust, or a relationship that's formed. And being a student, you get to interact with all sorts of different teachers, professors, administrators, all sorts of different things all over the university. And that was kind of one of those early, highlights for me that said, I can see where the people and the technology intersect here. And I could see a path. So I would say Barb was one of those very, very early, hey, come along, let's do this together kind of people for me.
And this is while you were at Mount St. Mary's?
This is, yes, Mount St. Mary's in Maryland. Yep.
And you were getting your bachelor's at the time, or your master's?
I was getting my bachelor's at the time in information systems. And then I wound up, because I knew that I wanted to deeply understand the business side of things too. I wound up sticking around and doing another year and a half to finish up my MBA at the time. So I was really glad that I did that. I did it while working as well. So that was when I started working with the Department of Defense. I had a scholarship, and I was both doing my master's program at the time, as well as getting ready to work for the government. And that was really where the connection, and kind of being in the DC, Virginia, Maryland area, that's where a lot of the industry is headed. In some form or fashion, there's support to the government or government agencies. And it was always something that was interesting to me also, because there's a mission aspect to it. There's a really hard problem that you're trying to solve. You're working with really brilliant people all over the world to get this done. So it really kind of triggered, this is something I could see myself doing for a long time.
And for our super secret agents that don't know what information systems is, can you share that with them, please?
Oh, fabulous question. So, funny story. I started out in computer science as a major, and I loved the coding part of it. I kind of considered it learning a different language. I learned Japanese growing up, And that was my second language. Being in Hawaii, Japanese was very, very helpful. And so I could see some parallels between learning a second language. Now I'm not fluent anymore, so if anyone speaks Japanese, I'm going to disappoint you. But I saw a lot of parallels between learning a new language and learning a coding language. So I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I wound up, and this is totally okay to say, I wound up switching majors because I got into a particular course in math. And I was like, this is no longer interesting for me. I want more of a business flavor of it. So I worked with my professor, and there were a handful of people who really wanted that kind of blend of business and technology. And we wound up being the first class at my university to graduate with an information systems major. It was kind of new at the time. Now it's far more common. But it's a blend, really, to answer your question. It's a blend of technology, some coding, a lot of business, some people management. It's kind of this, for me, it's a perfect intersection of technology, business, people, and how to make useful and productive things with all of them.
And is there a master's program for that as well? Or did you just decide that you just wanted to do business instead?
At the time, there was no master's program. But since then, there have been many master's programs in information systems, as well as, I would say, a close parallel would be cybersecurity, computer science, certainly. But business was interesting for me because I felt like I wanted to go deeper into that area of study. A really funny thing also happened when I was doing my MBA studies. So I took a class in entrepreneurship. And I'm thinking, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to have a tech background with some business and start a company. And I still remember this to the day. The professor that I had, he was a great guy. And he said, now, everyone listen up. By virtue of you all sitting here today, you are less likely to start your own business because the amount of risk that comes along with starting a business is very concerning. And anyone who's calculating risk is like, no way, it's way too much. So that always stuck with me about, when you're learning entrepreneurship, you're actually creating more awareness of risk. You can play that both ways, right? It's not a don't do this kind of risk. It's a let's be mindful of all of the options, the opportunities, the challenges, all of those things. And that definitely stuck with me from the program.
Okay, so walk us through this. So you were first at the help desk, and then you went to the Department of Defense.
Yep.
And how long were you there for before you went on to Google?
So I spent about 15 years supporting all sorts of different aspects of the government. Department of Defense was one part of it. I also worked for the National Institute for Standards and Technology. So what do? So they actually make encryption codes. That's their primary responsibility. But they do a lot of other research as well. So I started at the help desk. I worked with them for about a year. And I worked with, believe it or not, the American Dental Association does a ton of materials research. And so we had a facility where people would come in and the dentists, the research dentists, were experimenting with all sorts of different types of, if you go to the dentist and unfortunately have a cavity, you have something that they have to put in there. There's maybe a polymer, a metal, or something like that. Well, we did all of the testing for how much pressure does it actually take for those fillings, those materials to crack or rupture. So we did all sorts of really wild things with big machines that have tons and tons and tons of pressure. But the connective tissue on all of that was technology, right? You had sensors, you had a bunch of data that was collected from all of these different machines. And then you had to kind of combine that all to make some sense and build a story about, is this a viable product or is this something that we need to do some more development around? And so I took care of all of the researchers' computers, all of the testing equipment, and all of this stuff to help make their research happen. From there, I then spent a few years as a consultant where I was what we called a business analyst. And a business analyst takes a lot of data, essentially. We created plans, we created different. I was also a project manager at the time. So we created something called a project plan where you had critical paths to help people understand how long it was going to take to accomplish something. And in that, that was, again, a combination of technical, some business aspects, a lot of people management. I actually ran a data center. So underground, before you had the cloud and all of those things. And it's kind of an interesting pathway to the cloud. I took care of a team of about 16 people, and we took care of, we were taking care of the power space and cooling, the server racks, all of the networking, the security, you name it, we took care of it. It was our enclave. And we did that to understand all sorts of different types of data and what kind of patterns and things existed in that data. And then after that, a couple years down the road, I was at a point where I was running a very large team, and the cloud was up and running, but it was very limited in use for our customers. And I was like, I think there's more out there, but we're just not able to really use it or bring it into our space quite yet. So I started doing some research into the different clouds that were being built. Google Cloud, Microsoft Cloud, Amazon Cloud, all sorts of different clouds, and even all of the smaller kind of very specific bespoke ones. And I was really interested in how Google built our cloud. It was very scalable. It was like a global computer is the best way that we describe it. And it's funny that I'm here with you today because today is actually a pretty big day for Google. We're having a birthday, and it's our 25th year.
That's so right. On the Google logo, it said 25th birthday. I was like, ooh, that's awesome. Happy birthday, Google.
Kind of cool. Yeah. And, we've come a long way. But the thing that really attracted me to Google was just how we took very, very known problems and thought about them in very different and unique ways. And, you can look online today and look back and see a bunch of the early days and early stories of Google Maps and Docs and things that we kind of use in Gmail and all of that stuff. Very common today. But back then it just didn't exist. And there was a lot of trial. There was a lot of error. There were a lot of really silly things that we tried because we're like, we don't know if it's going to work or not. So let's give it a shot. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. So that experimentation was just really, really cool. But it yielded some really impressive systems, and the cloud that we know today as Google Cloud was really, built on all of those experiments.
Okay, so for our secret agents that don't know what the cloud is, can you explain that to them?
Okay, so the cloud, so you used to have a computer under your desk, a big old box, and it was hot, it had some fans, it was kind of loud, but that was where all of your computation power used to reside. What the cloud is through networking, you are actually using the compute resources instead of something under your desk in a data center, maybe 20 miles, maybe thousands of miles away from you, depending on where you are. And the cloud really helps to give you access to technology at a very, very low cost relative to how much, if you were going to buy an entire server, would cost. It allows you to use just what you need. So a lot of the folks that I work with build companies using the technology that they purchase through the cloud. So whether they're app developers, whether they make music, whether they are in healthcare and they do analytics and research within healthcare, you name it, people have found countless uses for the compute and the networking and the AI and ML that's now available through cloud resources. Is that helpful?
Definitely. And I think it would be good for them to know, like, you started as a cloud engineer at Google, and now you're the head of basically the customer engineering department. So tell us about that journey.
Yes. So I started in 2017, and it was a very small team at the time. And I like to say it was, I joined when the team was super tiny. It was myself, a couple of other people and a dog. And Google is very dog friendly. So you literally could bring your dog. You can still bring your dog to work. It's really cool. They're called Douglers instead of Googlers. And so when I started as a customer engineer, what that meant was I worked with our end customers to figure out what they wanted to do with the cloud. And much like your question, it was kind of unknown. Like we did a lot of education around what is possible. How should I think about the cloud? Because there's a lot of different things. The things that we use as consumers is like search and docs and email and your phone and all sorts of different things. But behind it, sits a ton of infrastructure, everything from the way water gets to your house, to the way movies are made, to how healthcare is delivered, to how we do research going forward. So what I wound up doing at the time was I worked with the different customers to figure out how does that even relate to their business? Because a lot of them did not start in the cloud. Since then, a lot of companies have been created because of the cloud or using cloud technology. But what we did at the time was we really mapped requirements of what a customer does today, what a business does today, to, okay, how can you do it better, faster, cheaper, using cloud resources instead of managing it yourself? And I had led teams really since college. And that was really where my passion was, but I wanted to understand first how the whole process works, right? And instead of jumping into it as a manager right away at Google, I decided, no, I really want to understand it from a process and kind of a foundational level first. So I did that for a few months, and they're like, okay, Jen, now we're ready. Let's take on a team. So I built a team, and at the time I was leading the government team for Google Cloud. It was, again, very, very small, early days, and learned a lot along the way. But the thing that I hadn't done, and being at Google, I was like, I was ready for that new challenge. I hadn't ever worked with companies and customers like you would know about today. Retail companies, consumer goods, any of those things. Pick a brand that we're all familiar with. I had never worked with companies like that. Folks who needed to create profit, right? That was their outcome. And I'm like, I'm at Google. Let me try something new and different. So I wound up moving from the public sector, from the DoD team, over to more of a commercial space. And I was leading teams of other customer engineers who were working with autonomous car companies. We were working with healthcare companies. We were working to do radiology, machine learning to figure out where people were having issues with their heart or their lungs before their body told them that they were having issues. So it was incredibly rewarding work and very different than I had done before. My goal at the time was to bring that experience back to the government space. But I fell in love with the commercial space. And now I actually have made a couple of moves within Google, and I lead teams within our startup and small businesses. So these are a lot of customers who they're building things using like generative AI and ML, machine learning, and all sorts of really new and emerging things that truly did not exist 2 or 3 years ago. And the reason that all of these things exist, you may have heard of like ChatGPT and things like that. They're very, 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 like, we didn't have the compute, we didn't have the data, we didn't have all sorts of different things to make those a viable product, even just a few years ago. But because of the advances in technology, now they are viable products and people are able to build businesses off of them. So that's largely the customers that I work with today.
Very interesting. Those are all different sectors, but I think it sounds like you found your passion, and going back to MBA school and the entrepreneurship and everything, it all came together in a nice package now. That's awesome. All right, I'm going to shift to some questions from the students. The first one is a comment and then a question. You are a role model and a real life superhero. Have you had someone who inspired you in your STEM journey?
Let's see. So I'm going to answer this in kind of an unexpected way. It's up to us to create some of that inspiration. I have historically, from the beginning of my professional career, worked primarily with people who did not look necessarily like me. And I was okay with that because I didn't know any different. And I didn't look at that and say, shoot, where's the Jen sitting there at the table? I need to go sit next to Jen. I was kind of stubborn, a little hard-headed, and very curious. So the combination of all of those things kind of created a space for me just to kind of create my own Jen.
And that sounds like a good thing, because it sounds like you were inspired to be unique to who you are and to bring your superpowers out, which is actually another question that will come. But go ahead and I'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I've always really gravitated to strong, curious, kind of builder personalities, because I just feel like there's just such great conversation. There's such great curiosity that comes along with that. And, certainly within aviation, there are some amazing women over the course of many, many decades that broke, barriers along the way. And they're super inspiring, like Amelia Earhart and Bessie and a bunch of different ladies who, created things that didn't exist, but there was no form, there was no mold for them to fit into before they got into the first helicopter, they got into the first airplane that they got a license in, so those kinds of things have definitely helped to shape, hey, this is okay to be different and to take advantage of your powers and all of that stuff.
Yeah. So on that note, the question that came in, what superpowers do you find that you have that pushed you to where you are today?
Ooh, I love this question for so many reasons. I often ask when I'm meeting someone new for the first time, what is your superpower? Or if we're in a group, like, what is your superpower? And we go around and we all talk about our superpowers. So for me, mine would be the power of perception. So if I look back over my career and my professional journey, I've always been in that role to figure out what someone needs. And whether they're coming out and saying, Jen, this is exactly what I need, or I don't know what I need, can you help? The power of perception. And so that goes along with listening, that goes along with understanding your craft, researching, and being really deep in whatever area of expertise that you're responsible for, because that gives you that like relatability, but also the trust that people will listen, right? Because you've done the research, you've been there, you've walked that walk, and you can guide them on where they need to go next. So I would say perception would be my superpower.
That's a great one. On that note, let's go back to a question that I had originally about like what you learned when you were 11 years old that you have basically kept with you today. Like what advice is that? What was that?
All right, I'm going to tell you a fun story. So at 11 years old, I started my first business. Remember that entrepreneur curiosity? Well, it started at 11 years old. And I was living very close to the beach, as I mentioned. And I started a shave ice stand. And I was the only one. I was the only business on the beach. I'm pretty sure it was illegal. But I was like, there's a lot of people on the beach. I bet they're hot.
And this is in Hawaii, right?
This is in Hawaii. Yes, they're hot. Let's create a little shave ice stand. And so the shave ice in Hawaii is super, super popular. And so I had my stand, I had my bag of ice, I had my flavors, and I was charging a whopping 50 cents per shave ice cup to all of my customers. And I quickly realized a couple of different things. I dramatically underestimated demand for the product that I was selling. At Sunset Beach, it's a very popular tourist destination. So you would have tour buses of 40 or more people stopping. They would get off the bus. They're hot as can be. And they come right over and they're like, I would love a shave ice. So my line was very long and I was only one person cranking away. So I underestimated demand. Second thing was I vastly underestimated the value of the product that I was selling. And I had already made the signs and everything. So I'm like, I couldn't change my price because then it looks like I'm, taking advantage of the market or something like that. So I was selling it for 50 cents per cup. And people would come up and they're like, well, I don't have change. And I didn't have change either. So it should have been my moment to say, oh, maybe I just need to do $1 or $2 or something like that. But I didn't. So then I thought, well, how do I make this bigger? And very short-sighted of me, a lot of life lessons in starting something like this. I have some friends, I have some siblings. Maybe I could just bring them into the business with me. My short-sighted error in that was, well, if I brought them in, I have to share my profits. And therefore, I don't want to have to share with anyone. So I didn't. And I realized very quickly that was mistake number 3. But by then I had gotten so deep into my early decisions that like, I can't do this anymore. So I closed up shop. But I learned a lot of really tough lessons along the way that have definitely stuck with me. So make sure you know your audience, price your goods appropriately, and bring the right people with you, because that can really help you, grow your business.
And it sounds like when their demand is high, you have to be prepared, and also maybe go to the bank and get some change just in case you need some. Like, there's all these things you have to think about when you're running a business that you don't think about normally. But at 11, you're just getting thrown into it, like into the pit of fire. So
right, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, let me go back to some questions from the students. Okay, let's see. What advice would you give our super secret agents looking into business and Google Cloud and becoming a leader?
So the advice that I would give to all of those different things is actually quite common. The advice that I would have is try things that you are unfamiliar with. Sometimes we'll say like default to yes. Try a lot of things that you maybe you're curious about, but you're not really sure if this is your thing. And you're going to figure out really, really quickly if this is your thing or not. So, be a sponge, always be a student of whatever it is that you're working on, whether you're trying to get a new job, whether you're going for an internship, whether you're trying to figure out, what path you want to take as far as area of study and area of focus. Be really, really open to trying a lot of different things, because over time you get to build this history of things that you really love and that really speak to you, as well as the things that you're like, oh, tried it, did it, don't love it, I'm going to move on to something else. So
that's great advice. Okay, I know that you strive to empower and advocate for individuals from underrepresented groups, and you are part of the Breaking the Norms and Glass Ceilings and all the things. So as an active member and a facilitator for I Am Remarkable, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure thing. So I'm Remarkable is an incredible program that was started a few years ago by a couple of ladies at Google. And since then, it has been run in over 190 countries around the world, with over 400,000 participants. So the gist of the entire program is, and I'm going to give you kind of the teaser on this, but go check it out. If you can do one of these sessions, it is truly one of the most impactful things I've done, hence why I've become a facilitator for it. But there are 2 main things based on a boatload of research, based on a boatload of data, about watching businesses grow, watching leadership trends, watching diversity impact of, what does a diverse board for a company yield in profit versus one that is more homogenous. And so I'm going to give you 2 pieces that you can write down today, that you can take with you. And the first one is, it's not bragging when it's based on facts. So it's not bragging when it's based on facts. And the second one is, accomplishments do not speak for themselves. And the why I highlight both of those is because, everyone will build a network of individuals around them. The thing that we haven't cracked, even with all of our amazing cloud technology, is how to be a mind reader. So you have to develop a sense of comfort, and this is really hard, to talk about your accomplishments in a way that is not boastful. It's not bragging, because it's based on facts. Sometimes it can kind of feel uncomfortable to talk about things that you've done, things that you've accomplished, awards that you've received, and all of that. When in reality, it's not bragging because it's based on a fact. And then the accomplishments do not speak for themselves means that we're terrible mind readers. And it's really a combination of being an advocate for one another while also being your own advocate. So there's a balance there. And the accomplishments do not speak for themselves means that you have to develop that comfort with talking about the accomplishments, because unless you're doing it, it may not happen, right? And you want to be recognized for the work that you've delivered. So it's an incredible program. You can find it online. And yes, if anyone has a chance to go to one of those, please take advantage of it. They're free. They're amazing and incredibly impactful. So that was just a little teaser of how cool it is.
No, I can attest to that because that's how we met at the IM event here in Google in LA at the hangar. It was phenomenal. And I wish our secret agents have the opportunity to do that as well. I think it would be really good for them, even at a young age. It doesn't matter how old you are. I think it's remarkable. So thank you for sharing that. It's truly, it stands for its name. That's absolutely true. If there's any, links on YouTube, because I know our secret agents are obsessed with YouTube, maybe they could find something. We can share it in the show notes as well. And then else, I had a question, actually, I was thinking about, since our secret agents are very into YouTube, is there a cloud that YouTube has as well? And is that, how does that work?
So let's see, YouTube runs in the cloud. So you all are using the cloud, whether you realize it or not already, which is really cool. And then YouTube, to me, is like the endless font of information. So if you want to learn about being a customer engineer, you can Google, or you can, search in YouTube, what does a Google customer engineer do? And it'll be very similar to what we talked about, but go a little bit deeper into, the types of technology and things to prepare and all of those things. But literally, I mean, there's so much there that is available. And, you can really go down deep into any of those areas of study. We put out a boatload of videos. We have a ton of podcasts that you can also take a look at or listen to. There's so much. You just have to kind of pick and choose, what you want to listen to first, I would say.
Yeah, and we're happy to add them in the show notes for secret agents to follow and watch moving forward. What advice would you give our aspiring secret agent trainees in the audience?
Oh, in addition to try everything, default to yes, try everything. I would say the thing that has been just excellent throughout my journey so far, and hopefully it's just the start of it, is always be a student, always be open to learning something new, to figuring out that things may not always be exactly what you expect them to be, and to embrace that and to be comfortable with it, because that's where the growing, that's where the learning happens. So being open, being a continuous student, there's this adage that says, if you're always learning, you never get stale, and you're always growing and things like that. So I would say just always be a student, always be curious, figure out something new each week, and share it with people. The moment that you begin teaching something is when it really has kind of sunk in and you can apply it to other situations. So always be a student, always be curious. Those are just evergreen pieces that I would suggest.
Thank you for sharing those. That's great advice. Okay, looking into the future is exciting. What do you imagine for girls in STEM down the road, and how can we make sure that everyone gets a chance to be part of the STEM adventure?
Oh, good one. So I think it starts with all of us. What we're doing today, we've created this community. We've shared experiences, And much like we were talking about with I'm Remarkable, being an advocate for one another, talking about accomplishments, and being open with these are the things that I'm doing. That's important. That's very, very important. And taking action and sticking with it is also right up there. Because at some point there will be people, you will be presenting, the folks that are on the call today, you will be presenting. And there will be kind of another group of folks who are like, I can see myself doing that. And that is really, really, really important. So continue being curious and, create the community, advocate for one another, and push each other. Bring each other along and say, hey, I'm working on this really cool project. Does anyone else want to be part of it? And that shared experience is really, really powerful. So I would love to see that for the future of STEM. And I'm just thrilled to be, part of it at this point in my career as well.
Yeah, that's so true. I think it takes a tribe and a village. And I think we're paving the way for the next generations.
Yeah, very true.
Thank you. All right. So let's switch to our 60-second quick answers, and then we'll do key takeaways. What is your favorite toy or favorite toy growing up?
Favorite toy growing up was my bike, because you could go forever and ever and ever. It was freedom.
And what about favorite video game?
Nintendo, Mario Brothers, old school. Yes.
Did you watch the movie?
I did. I watched the movie. It was awesome. Highly recommend it.
Yeah. Cute. Yeah, it was very cute. I was obsessed with Nintendo too, and Atari back then. But yeah, so good. It's like childhood coming to life.
Oh yeah, the sounds, all of it. Yes.
Yeah, everything. And then of course we had Princess Peach and the song from Jack Black. That was awesome. Let's see. What's your favorite superhero?
My favorite superhero. This is hard to pick. So I'm going to give you two because this is hard to pick. Spider-Man, because he can climb walls and that's just stinking cool, and you can swing all over the city. And then Elastigirl, because she's just cool. She rides motorcycles. She can do all sorts of things. She can turn herself into a parachute. She's amazing. So it's hard to pick just one, but yeah, I would say those are my two faves.
Those are good combos. And I think now with Spider-Man and all the metaverses and the multiverses and all the new spiders, different versions, it's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Favorite show or animated series as a child?
Favorite show or animated series as a child? Oh goodness. We were outside a lot. I didn't watch a boatload of TV. I probably watched, oh goodness. I'm going to have to come back to you on this one.
So good. I know it's like blast from the past.
Yes.
What about favorite show now that maybe you're watching with your kids or something?
So we just watched Gran Turismo last night. It just came out. It's so cool. It's about a boy who was an incredible race car driver online, and in the game Gran Turismo. And then a few years ago, Nissan, after this was based on real life, Nissan put out a competition for the best video gamers to get in actual cars. And the best racer from that competition then became an actual Nissan professional driver. It was a great story. So that was my most recent one. And I love anything that is just kind of smart and witty. And, I love anything that has a good strategy line to it.
Yeah, that's good. I think that was on my list of things to watch for sure, especially because as a video game and everything about real life, it's very cool. Yeah. And the fact that they did that whole thing with Nissan is like super cool.
Super cool. I'm a big car person as well. So bringing back the excitement of driving, that was really cool to see too.
Yeah, you mentioned cars and trains and planes. So that's awesome. I love it. All right. So how can our special secret agent trainees follow your journey moving forward? Do you have Instagram? Do you have a website? Is it LinkedIn? Like, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So all of the business things are on LinkedIn. So that's the best way to find me over there. All of the fun and creative things are on Instagram. So you can find me as Jen Diff is my handle on Instagram, and follow along there.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Now we're going to do key takeaways. And if we missed anything, please let us know so we can add. All right. Explore all of your interests. It's up to us to create inspiration. Continue being curious. Have the right people around you. Own up to who you are. Look into things that you are unfamiliar with. Be open to trying a lot of different things. Recognize the work you delivered and share it with others. Always be a student. Be open to learning something new. Embrace and become comfortable with the unexpected.
I could not have said that better. That was perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your journey in STEM with us and your journey at the cloud, from literal clouds to Google Cloud. So awesome. Thank you. Thank you again. I'm sure that our super secret agents will get a lot out of our conversation, and we're so honored and lucky to have you. Thank you again.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been a ton of fun. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to the future of STEM with everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Secret Agent trainees. We'll see you back here tomorrow.